I've mentioned before that a lot of people who get involved in Smash speculation don't always know what to look for. Leads to a lot of misinformed opinions and a lot of bandwagons springing up around characters who aren't as likely as some might claim they are. You get this focus on a character's identity, on who they are or what series they're from. This obsession with reps and how many reps a series has and whether they deserve more reps or which ones are under-repped and need more. So many speculators act like Sakurai checks characters off a list, and then after everyone's been chosen, the team just conjures up movesets as an afterthought. But that's not how it happens, not based on what he said. And if we want to actually get a feel for which characters could have a shot, we need to focus on the truth and not just the popular opinions. You see, one of the biggest things the Smash team looks for, something Sakurai has touched on many times, is uniqueness. More than anything, he wants new additions to Smash to bring in new ideas and new abilities. I mean, sure, being a prominent character is important, and so is being relevant if you're a first-party newcomer who isn't a retro pick, but being able to do things no other character can is a major point toward being able to stand out on a roster that just keeps growing. The truth is, movesets and character concepts aren't an afterthought, they're an integral part of the selection process. And in the far gone time of summer 2014, a couple certain Fire Emblem characters made that clear. A lot of speculators back then basically considered Chrom a lock. He was one of Fire Emblem Awakening's main protagonists, he was the Lord character of the game and had the classic protagonist feel. He was the one who was supposed to get in, and people outside the Fire Emblem fandom seemed to assume he was the done deal and the only potential FE newcomer who had a shot. Then the reactions to the Gamatsu League took that sentiment and magnified it, to the point where supporters of anyone else from Awakening started getting harassed for not following the bandwagon. And yet, after all of that, Chrom wasn't the one who got in. Fellow protagonist Robin joined the ranks instead, with Lucina tagging along as a bonus clone. So what happened? Well, we learned later that Robin and Chrom were both considered early in Smash 4's development, which is probably when the source of the Gamatsu League got their info. The team took a deep look into who the characters were and what they could do, to see what ideas they could find to build their concepts around. And they weren't satisfied with what Chrom brought to the table. His natural fighting style felt too much like a rehash of Marth and Ike. Sure, they could have reached more to give him something unique, but that would have risked him not feeling true to character, like if they'd tried to cram a square peg into a hole shaped like the brand of the Exo. Meanwhile, Robin offered so many new ideas. Swordplay and magic combined, elemental spells used in ways we hadn't seen before, even a mechanic based on weapon durability. They pulled the trigger on Robin and passed on Chrom because Robin was that much more unique. So while we're looking at who could get into this probable Smash 4.5, we're best off looking at characters who are relevant, prominent enough to get considered, and most importantly, have unique traits or abilities that feel like a natural fit in Smash. And that brings us to our character, or characters, today. Flying under the radar because they aren't what many are expecting, but they're capable of things no current fighter is. And if they were handled the right way, they'd be capable of something no one else could even dream of. Lycanroc is a Pokemon newly introduced in Sun and Moon, the evolved form of Rockruff, bearers of the Rock type, and the series' first true wolves. Can't believe we went this long without any. The line's notable in that the form your Rockruff takes when it evolves depends on the version it evolves in, though you can still get the other form from the wild in a late game dungeon. They're also kind of a big deal, in-universe and out. Rockruff pets and companions show up everywhere in Alola. The local professor has a Rockruff and uses him 3 times to demonstrate battle mechanics, and said Rockruff is also the first Pokemon you see when you start your adventure. The Kahuna Olivia has a Lycanroc as her signature Pokemon, and 2 Lycanrocs even show up as prominent team members in the Alola Pokemon League. But the exact details are spoilers. Shh. And when you consider the alchemy motif that pops up occasionally in Sun and Moon, the starters in Rockruff may be intended to represent the 4 classical elements. On top of that, the line appears in promotional material left and right. Rockruff and both Lycanroc forms have shown up in many pieces of promo art and trailers in the last year. We're talking consistency nearly on par with the starters here. Or how about the manga series in the Japanese magazine Korokoro that features a kid and his Rockruff exploring Alola? And it even carries into other merchandise. You know those adorable Pokemon plush toys? There are multiple lines of them from several companies with different plans, but look at who keeps showing up as one of the first ones they keep making after the starters. Then the Pokemon trading card game is introducing a new mechanic for Gen 7 in the form of GX cards. And what do you know, a Lycanroc just happens to be the first one revealed after the starters and legendaries. If we're talking character archetypes, there's strong reason to believe Lycanroc is meant to be this generation's Lucario, even without a tie-in movie. While the line hasn't become an instant standout the way Lucario was, blame the plethora of fan favorites in Gen 7, all of this attention certainly makes it seem like Nintendo, Game Freak, and all powers involved consider Lycanroc to be important. Important enough to, say, be on the short list of the mons the Smash team would have been considering several months ago. And since last year's DLC showed they had no problem doubling up on characters from the same franchise, there's reason to believe that Decidueye and Lycanroc could both get in because their abilities are so vastly different. So, due to the fact that the Lycanroc species could take two different forms, we're going to be approaching this character concept a little differently. First, we're going to take a look at the form that's better suited for Smash's environment. The werewolf-like Midnight Lycanroc is the form a Rockruff takes from evolving under the influence of Lunala's energy, namely in Moon version at night. They're said to get a thrill out of combat and especially from fighting strong opponents, so much so that their eyes glow from their fighting spirit flaring up. Their signature fighting style involves provoking enemies into attacking them, enduring the hit, then retaliating with a devastating blow. They're very strong-willed, to the point where they show contempt toward trainers who are too controlling or don't let them fight on their own terms. Hey, no one likes helicopter parents. But work with them, and you'll have a powerful ally who will put their utmost trust in your hands. And since they walk upright, they're better suited for moving, attacking, and interacting with items in Smash's environment than their daylight brethren. So like with Decidueye, nailing Midnight Lycanroc's appearance down is less about the look, since that's already set in stone, and more about getting the personality right. Midnight's a born fighter, itching to jump into the fray and come out on top. His attack animations would reflect that, powerful looking even in the times when they're more unwieldy. Maybe you could even throw in an idle animation where he punches the air a couple times? Then we'd add stuff in straight from the games, like the slouching default stance, which would probably be more upright when moving or attacking, and the bring it pose as his second idle animation. And they could even have his eyes actually glow. But now we gotta take that kind of feel and put it into categories and numbers. Midnight Lycanroc's lore says their preferred fighting style is to provoke enemies into using unsafe attacks and then hitting them hard for it, which is a bait and punish playstyle in a nutshell. Midnight wants to be up close and personal with opponents and crush them at the first sign of aggression. I think we could portray this by giving Midnight pretty good range on his normals, useful out of shield options, and a good standing grab, solid grab follow-ups, maybe even a killing up throw at around 150 or so to fall back on. But what about the other half of that playstyle? Well, when you're a rock type and therefore basically an earthbender, those kinds of powers tie right into having the means to control parts of the arena and corral opponents where you want. They can run, but they can't hide, unless they want to get put in a disadvantage for trying to hide. Stats are the next piece of the puzzle, and if you remember from last episode, most Pokemon characters get sized up for Smash. If the dex is accurate at all, your typical Lycanroc actually isn't very big. So to really make the concept work, we need to make the Smash incarnation closer to human size, just like what was done with Lucario. Midnight's weight is kind of a weird case. We want an increased weight that matches the increased size, and being a little heavier than he looks ties into the motifs of Earth and Stone. If you're thinking it's a flimsy argument, there's precedent. In Brawl, Ivysaur was given the same weight as Lucario despite the Dex saying they average 1/4 Lucario's weight in their home games. Considering your typical Lycanroc is said to weigh almost twice as much as an Ivysaur, I think we have some elbow room here. Having enough meat on his bones to qualify as a middleweight fits the concept. So as far as mobility goes, Midnight's base speed is 82. Not breaking any records, but it's okay. I decided to translate that into below average but not bad mobility overall. It's enough to chase much of the cast and pose a threat, but still be vulnerable to getting kited by projectile zoners who could sit safely outside his range. Being a fast faller? Well, it ties into the Earth motif. What can we use to create the moveset itself? First up, directly from the Rockruff line's level set, the classic Tackle for a dash attack. Sand Attack is a down tilt with some startup, but with a hitbox that lasts longer than most tilts tend to. Bite as a brutal looking pummel, and Stone Edge as part of Midnight's up smash animation, where he'd perform an uppercut motion and the stone spikes would rise up alongside his fist. Rock Throw and Rock Slide could be worked into multiple moves, through generating rocks and propelling them away, either by hitting them or by making motions that manipulate the rocks. You could use these moves as the basis for the forward and down smashes and some aerials. A down air concept I've been playing with involves creating a rock immediately below Midnight for a weak first hit that knocks away opponents sitting too close, then kicking the rock downward at anyone immediately below for a disjointed spike. Kinda like Mega Man's Dare and Function, with just as much lag. We can also pull more stuff from the lore and thematics. Many of the attacks that don't directly involve rocks would be claw swipes or punches. To fit Midnight's personality, they'd mainly be wild, feral swings. And with the Earth affinity and all, you'd figure a playable Lycanroc would have a focus on grounded combat, with a strong ground game. His aerials wouldn't be bad, just not as useful. Midnight in particular could have a few attacks with partial heavy armor, giving him a way to punish opponents not just for hitting his shield, but for picking the wrong offensive options, by plowing right through them. But the moves would only have armor for short sections, nothing like Little Max smashes, and they'd be pretty laggy to compensate. Over-rely on him and you'll be the one getting punished. As a thematic touch, you could have a crawl that puts him on all fours, though it'd probably be slow and still lead to him getting hit by stuff, and be kinda useless overall. And you gotta make one of his taunts a howl. You just gotta! But now we have one more piece to put together. Midnight Lycanroc's special attacks. His neutral special will be a semi-original attack called Counterstone. It's based on the move Counter, treated as Midnight's signature move, despite the fact that it's been around since Gen 1 and shows up on a decent amount of other lines. Short end of the stick much? In the Pokemon games, it makes the user act last, and if they get hit with a physical attack in the meantime, they unleash a counterattack that damages the attack source twofold. In Smash, it'd have a twist to keep it from being yet another down B counter that just happens to be a neutral B. Midnight would take a defensive stance and cross his arms over his chest. If he takes damage, he jumps into action and, just like the Dex entry in Moon says, delivers a devastating headbutt with a stone spike on the front of his mane. So, what's the catch? Well, you still take damage from the hit. Counterstone wouldn't nullify the hit, it merely grants super armor. But in exchange, the counterattack would deal 1.4 times the damage and knockback of the hit that triggered it, the strongest scaling of any counter of its kind. Just make sure you don't use it if your opponent's a safe distance away, or on projectiles, since you still take the damage even if the counterattack whiffs. For the side special, the infamous, the dreaded, Stealth Rock. In Pokemon, this move sets a trap on the enemy's side that makes opposing mons take damage when they switch in. It knocks off 1/8 of their max health normally, but it's a rock-type move that's affected by type resistances, meaning anything with a double weakness to rock gets to watch half their hit points disappear just from coming into battle. This thing was kind of a game breaker when it was introduced in Gen 4. Some balancing's been done since to make hazards easier to get rid of, but it's still a powerful tool and a competitive mainstay. Not many lines learn it naturally, but the Rockruff line is one of them. We could transfer Stealth Rock into Smash by having Midnight toss a diamond-shaped stone forward that goes about 1/3 the distance of Final Destination before landing and staying put. If an opponent touches the rock from then on, it pops up and stuns them for a brief moment before shattering and sending them upward. Sound kinda scary? But don't worry, it wouldn't be as busted as it was 10 years ago. You wouldn't be able to pick it up and throw it again like you can with banana peels, and the rock would do minimal damage while it's being tossed, meaning you could clank it out, get rid of it entirely by blocking it with your face, or even try to catch it for yourself. Stealth Rock's main use is to be a risk wherever it's placed and dissuade opponents from hanging around there. The minor upward knockback would prevent follow-ups on the level of any of Diddy's ridiculous confirms, but it could lead into some combos or even extend them at low percents. I could see something like forward throw to activate a Stealth Rock to forward or back air. Midnight's up special is a little unconventional. Rock Climb. In-game, it's a normal type physical attack with 90 base power and 85% accuracy, with a 20% chance of confusing the target. It's kinda strong, but it's unreliable. Only ever saw use when it was in HM in Gen 4. It's yet another move that few lines learn naturally, and the Rockruff line happens to be one. In Smash, Rock Climb would create a short line of rocks that Lycanroc would clamber across on all fours as they appeared. 4 in all, plus a larger fifth one he'd leap off. The rocks would appear one at a time, and you could hold up or down to influence the angle they lined up in, kind of like how you could angle Roy's Blazer or Corrin's Dragon Ascent. The rocks themselves wouldn't cover much distance, Blazer's another good comparison, and the leap at the end would be about the same as a jump, making Lycanroc's recovery on its own not very good. Well, it makes sense for an Earth-based character to have a shaky offstage game with a recovery move that doesn't go far but will get you the distance it can get you. On the bright side, it'd have a pretty fast startup that'd give it Dragon Punch-like potential as a quick anti-air or out-of-shield option. Nice damage overall, but I don't think it would kill until late. Less boost kick, more Dragon Ascent again, I guess. Rock Climb's pretty unconventional for the style of up special it is. It's a nice offensive option, but as a recovery move, you'd need to be smart and mix up when and how you use it, or risk it not carrying you far enough to save yourself. There'd be hitboxes on the rocks and on Midnight himself, but the sweet spots would be on the rocks, so aim accordingly. But what if you want to cut off opponents' routes completely? That's where our down special comes in, Rock Tomb. In its home series, it's a physical rock-type move with 60 base power and 95% accuracy, and if it hits, it lowers the target's speed. It's been around as a TM with a wide distribution ever since Gen 3, but only a small handful of lines get it naturally. Wouldn't you know it, the Rockruff line is one of them. Smash could take inspiration from the move's description of preventing opponents' movement, taking the form of a wall of 3 tall stones that materialize above and in front of Lycanroc that plummet until they landed on a surface. Anyone who runs into them, as long as they're there, would take minor damage and ricochet off and hit stun that could potentially set up a follow-up. Like in its home series, Rock Tomb would be a way of controlling the pace of the fight. Its ability to take up space and damage opponents who run into it would give Midnight a way to not only control part of the stage, but outright punish characters who run around too much. In this matchup, high speed could be a detriment. But it's not foolproof. The rocks would go away eventually, or if they took enough damage, only one could be set at a time, opponents could use rolls to get around them, and they'd only go about as high as chest height, letting characters with higher jumps get over them with even a short hop. And for Midnight's final smash? Okay, this one's pretty predictable. Continental Crush is one of the new Z moves, the new Limit Break-esque addition to Gen 7's battle system. Every type has its own, and this one's a Z move for the Rock type and is actually used by Olivia's Lycanroc in her Grand Trial. On use, it'd catch anyone nearby, then send them straight into the animation, with a twist. Midnight would be sitting on top of the massive stone formation as it falls, smirking the whole way down, knowing it'll help him win the fight. But if Midnight Lycanroc doesn't suit your fancy, there's another option. Midday Lycanroc is the form a Rockruff takes when exposed to the energy of the legendary Solgaleo, by evolving in Sun version during the day. Bearing a more conventional wolf-like design, Midday's quadrupedal build would be impractical in Smash, but not impossible. They'd have to be tricky with the animations and have to use their mouth to pick up and operate items. They wouldn't make a lot of sense with stuff like super scopes, but personally, I don't think that's the kind of deal breaker some others think it is. It's something they could hand-wave their way around if the rest of the concept was worth it, and you'll soon see why it is. Midday Lycanrocs have personalities that are quite the contrast from their lycanthropic counterparts. They tend to keep to themselves in the wild, stick to an area they claim as theirs, and avoid conflict unless they think they have no other choice. Which isn't all that unlike real-life wolves, actually. Trained Midday Lycanrocs are known for being highly loyal, devoted, and trustworthy toward anyone who raised them and put up with them as they grew up, a contrast to the Midnight forms like Day and Night themselves. Oh, and they're also really fast, trading 10 points in each defensive stat for 30 points in speed. That swiftness is actually a key way Midday Lycanroc's fighting styles also differ from their counterparts. They're more about using their high mobility to dodge opponents' attacks and then strike back before their assailants can react. You see, Midday's playstyle would still be big on bait and punish, but while Midnight wants to get in your face and punish out a shield or by armoring through a hit, Midday would be more about whiff punishes. Instead of being up close and personal, Midday Lycanroc would rather move just out of range of an attack and then run up and punish while you're stuck in end lag. But due to Midday having a more non-confrontational personality, there'd be a greater focus on stage controlling elements compared to Midnight. More powerful means to control space, dictate the flow of the match, and say, "This is my territory, stay out or else." And considering how much faster Midday is, it'd be that much easier to capitalize on anything those tools set up. We're talking run speed that'd be the 8th fastest of the current roster, along with a strong initial dash and airspeed that, while a hair below average, is still faster than Midnight's nonetheless. Helping out that evasive neutral game is the fact that Midday Lycanroc would be a little smaller than Midnight, and tougher for a lot of attacks to hit due to being lower to the ground, though being longer horizontally would partially make up for it. But weight and fall speed would remain the same. They feel like something worth keeping the way they are, especially since both Lycanroc forms are listed in the dex as having the same weight. So, what about Midday's moveset has to change from Midnight's? Actually, not much. Most of the moveset ideas we talked about for Midnight would still work for Midday. Since both forms have similar abilities and nearly identical level sets, almost everything transfers over fine. Some animations would change, of course, to make up for the different build and the fact that Midday can't reliably throw punches the same way, but the moves themselves would still have the same general feel. But it's the move's properties that'd be different. Midday's attacks would have less range overall due to shorter limbs and less reach, further emphasizing the focus on speed and punishing whiffed attacks rather than blocked ones. In addition, Midday's standing grab would have mediocre range due to grabbing opponents with her mouth, but she'd lunge during her dash and pivot grabs, gaining good range on those. She'd also have a crawl, but unlike Midnight's useless one, Midday's would put her low to the ground and under many projectiles and high attacks. Projectile zoning wouldn't work well on her compared to Midnight, but her lesser range would make her more vulnerable to getting zoned out by disjoints instead. The animations of the moves themselves would also change to fit the change in personality. Midday's attacks would feel very clean and precise, the work of a cool-headed and focused fighter. A pretty stark contrast to Midnight's brutality, wouldn't you say? Most of Midday's specials would also remain the same and carry over many of the same properties. Some details would be different though and fit the change in concept. For example, Stealth Rock's initial toss could go further, the Rock Tomb wall could be shorter, and Rock Climb could have a greater difference in how you can angle it but have smaller hitboxes that make it less useful on offense because opponents would have an easier time getting out with Smash DI. But her neutral special would be completely different, replacing Midnight's countering move with Midday Lycanroc's signature move, Accelerock. It's a physical rock move with 40 base power, 100% accuracy, and increased priority that ensures it'll hit first under most circumstances. The rock type is actually really good on offense, so having a priority rock move that only you can learn is a big deal. On use, Midday would brace herself for a brief moment, then leap about 1/4 the distance of Final Destination in a spinning lunge with the stones on her mane outstretched. They deal multiple hits on contact and have little end lag on hit that let it combo into other attacks up until close to 100%. But there'd be significant end lag if you missed or hit a shield, and if you used it in the air and didn't connect, you'd go into freefall. Accelerock would be designed to work best as, you guessed it, a whiff punish tool. Use it to respond to a miss or to poor spacing on your opponent's part, and you'll find it that much easier to gain the upper hand. Midnight's final smash would also carry over into Midday's moveset, but with a slightly different animation. Instead of standing on the falling mountain, Midday would be sitting a ways out of range and staring intently, silently condemning her enemies to their fate. But there's one more path they could take, and it's the one that truly shows what this character is capable of. Either Lycanroc form could work in Smash, but a lone wolf cannot reach its full potential on its own. So then, why not both forms? Having both Lycanrocs together would best emphasize the line's themes of night and day, opposite each other yet inexorably bound. Their individual personalities would shine in ways that highlight their identities as two halves of one whole. This one-of-a-kind fighter could let out a piercing howl that transformed between Midnight and Midday in the heat of battle, alternating between aggression and patience to suit whichever is most needed. But wait, you say they moved away from character transformations in battle? They no longer want players to have to learn multiple movesets to use one fighter effectively? Haven't you been following so far? Who says the movesets would need to change? As the two forms are members of the same species, with nearly identical level sets save for moves they learn either on evolution or through Move Reminder, every attack save the neutral special would carry over. We're talking something closer to a stance system, as each form would perform the same attack slightly differently with slightly different properties due to their different builds, allowing a Lycanroc player to utilize both forms' abilities with little extra practice. Everything we've discussed about each form as a solo act still applies here. The playstyle and stats would remain as they've been so far, but with increased importance from having another to contrast them with. Details of their movesets would shine in ways only possible as a pair. Midday's focus and resolve versus Midnight's primal ferocity. Midday's emphasis on mobility, control, and stepping in only when the time is right. Midnight's thirst for battle and predatory drive to bear down on opponents and punish them head on. There'd need to be some incentive to shift between them mid-match though, and not stick to one or the other based on the matchup. Some kind of positive reinforcement that makes the player feel rewarded for using it every couple minutes or so. I'm aware it's not exactly canon for a Lycanroc to be able to switch between forms, but we've seen Sakurai and his team take creative liberties before in situations where they thought it improved the character's concept without betraying who they were. It's led to stuff like Zelda with goddess magic we've never seen her use, Ness and Lucas using PSI attacks only their other party members can learn, and Robin using Nosferatu when the tactician class can't normally wield dark magic. Could a form-shifting Lycanroc be another such case? Who knows? Maybe it could even be the reason why they get chosen. Or there's another way they could do it, but it'd be less interesting and more likely to get on speculators' nerves. They could split them up into two characters who function as semi-clones of each other. And if they take the Switch part to heart for the Switch version, maybe we'll see a new tag team mode that two individual Lycanrocs would be perfect for. Hey, it's another option that's truer to canon, wouldn't require much more work than a transforming one, and they don't restrict themselves to a specific number of character slots anyway, so who knows? And that is everything Lycanroc could bring to Smash. The Twin Wolves from the Alolan Wilds, masters of Earth and Stone who control their territory and react to their opponents with moves similar in form but unique in function. Whether midday, midnight, or as the first character still capable of transformation despite Smash 4's new criteria for such, there are many different ways this icon of Alola could add something to the roster that no other character could. So, do you have an idea now of how much it means to have unique abilities? It's one of the most important things a potential newcomer can have, bonus clones notwithstanding, and it's something we need to take into account, whether we're speculating what upcoming Smash games could bring or trying to create concepts that feel authentic. So remember this going forward. Who a character is and what series they hail from isn't as important as what they can do. Our next episode is going to be a bit of a change of pace. Our first third-party character. It's someone who saw widespread support in the past only to have it fall off over time. But some recent revelations have shown they may have a greater chance than we ever realized. Until then, make sure to set aside some time to go outside and relax in the sun. Or moon. Hey, whichever works best for you.